The sun had barely dipped behind the tree line when Luke Mathers pulled into his driveway on Blue Jay Lane, his fishing rod still rattling in the back of his truck and the cooler filled with lake bass sloshing around in melted ice. It had been a good day, a quiet one, the kind of peace he'd come to his little cul-de-sac for. But as soon as he hit the garage opener, something felt off. Nothing happened. He pressed it again. No response. He frowned, stepped out of the truck, and tried. The front porch light, dark, a tight knot formed in his gut. His house was dead. Tina, his wife, opened the door from inside with a flashlight in hand and a raised eyebrow. You won't believe what our dear HOA left taped to the front door. Luke snatched the envelope. Fluorescent orange like a traffic ticket for your soul. Inside was a form labeled HOA violation notice, stamped aggressively with the president's initials, KB Karen Brewster, violation, unauthorized electrical modification, solar panels installed without approval. He read it again, then a third time. The panels had been up for 6 months. Permitted, inspected, signed off by the city. Luke stepped around the side of the house, lifted the hatch on the external breaker box and nearly blew a gasket. A heavy steel padlock had been slapped on, with red plastic, tagging it as locked by HOA authority. Tina appeared beside him. I already called the power company. They said the HOA requested a temporary shut-off due to safety concerns. They're reviewing it. Could take days. Luke didn't say a word. His hands clenched, his jaw locked. Karen had crossed the line. This wasn't just petty policy enforcement. This was control. Power literally. And she picked the wrong guy to mess with. Luke had spent 2 decades as an electrical engineer. He didn't just know wiring, he practically thought in voltage, Tina said slowly. I saw Karen peeking from behind her curtain when the power truck left, like she was waiting for something to happen. Luke nodded, already moving toward his workshop at the back of the property. She wanted to make a statement. And, well, he said, flipping open a tarp to reveal a quiet diesel generator. So will I. Within minutes, the low hum of the generator came to life, powering the essentials. A few lights blinked on inside the house. The porch glowed. The freezer resumed its gentle WHIR from across the street. Karen's blinds twitched. Luke gave the window a small wave. Calm and cool as ever. But inside, a storm was building. He knew Karen would escalate. She always did. She didn't just enforce rules, she invented them. Blue Jay Lane had been her private fiefdom for 5 years, and no one had ever pushed back. Until now. As Tina scrolled through the HOA bylaw PDFs on her tablet, Luke sat at the kitchen table, sketching wiring paths and battery plans on a napkin like it was a battlefield strategy. I'm not just going to fight back, he muttered. I'm going to make sure she never flips another switch again. The lights flickered once. Briefly, Karen must have noticed the power was still on. She'd be back. And she'd come harder. Luke smiled as he sipped his coffee now. Hot again, and whispered under his breath, your move, Karen. Because what she didn't know, and what he hadn't told anyone yet, was that he'd already been building a backup grid beneath their feet. And if she wanted a war over electricity, she was about to get the shock of her life. The morning after the blackout, Luke stood barefoot on his back deck with a steaming mug of coffee in hand, staring at the tree line while the generator hummed behind the shed. It wasn't about electricity anymore. It was about territory, and Karen Brewster had just wandered into the wrong man's zone. From across the street, Karen emerged like a general surveying the battlefield, hair tied in a tight blonde bun, clipboard in hand, lips pinched into her usual scowl. She wore her HOA badge like a sheriff's star, cheap plastic, but packed with unearned authority. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She just walked up the sidewalk like she owned it and paused right in front of Luke's fence. You're in violation of Section 8.2.1 of the HOA noise ordinance, she called out, her voice thin and sharp. That generator is unauthorized and is disrupting the peace of the neighborhood. Luke took a slow sip of his coffee. I'm sorry. I couldn't hear you over the sound of my frozen steaks not spoiling, he said, calm but pointed. Maybe if you hadn't padlocked my breaker box like a cartoon villain, we wouldn't need to have this little chat. Karen stiffened, but Luke noticed something else. Her eyes flicked toward the generator behind him, then quickly away, like she was assessing more than just the noise, like she wasn't done yet. I'll be filing a second violation, she said curtly. Expect it by tomorrow. Looking forward to it. She turned and marched off without another word. But Luke wasn't fooled. Karen didn't bluff. She schemed. And this was just her first move. Inside, Tina was already 3 cups into her morning espresso and elbow deep in HOA documentation. You're gonna love this, she said without looking up. There's no actual policy giving the HOA the right to touch a homeowner's electrical infrastructure. That whole shutoff was illegal, and the only justification Karen listed, emergency precaution due to unapproved energy risk, which doesn't exist. She made it up, Luke asked. She forged the policy code, even used old letterhead. Luke leaned over her tablet, scrolling through the digital records. His jaw tightened. Karen was playing dirtier, writing the rule book to suit her power trip. I'm going to city utilities, he said. In person, while Tina prepped a printed folder of documentation, Luke loaded the generator into his pickup just to make sure Karen couldn't mess with it while he was gone. By 11 a.m., he was downtown, stepping into the cool, stale office of the Department of Energy and Utilities. The man behind the counter was graying, glasses low on his nose, but sharp as a razor dot. When Luke explained what had happened, the man blinked. The HOA did what? Requested a power shutoff through your emergency safety clause, Luke said. Claimed it was a municipal risk. The clerk pulled up the request and frowned. We only process those when the city verifies a legitimate safety hazard. There's no record of inspection here. No complaint. Just this. Signed notice. He flipped the monitor toward Luke, and there it was. Karen's signature, and a heavily redacted complaint form attached to her name. No photos, no inspection report. Just a lie dressed in paperwork. I'm filing an appeal, Luke said, gripping the edge of the desk. You should file more than that, the clerk said. You've got grounds for a formal complaint. This might get her investigated. By the time Luke left the building, he'd filed an emergency restoration order, submitted a tampering report, and requested an audit on HOA actions against private utilities. And that wasn't all. He'd also made a quiet call to an old friend, an electrician who used to work as an infrastructure inspector for the city, someone who knew how to read the grid like a roadmap. When Luke returned home, Karen's SUV was parked across the street. She was talking to someone in a dusty electrician's van. They stood near a street transformer box, just casually close enough to raise suspicion. And when they saw Luke's truck coming down the road, both stepped back a little too quickly, drove by slow, met Karen's eyes, and offered the same quiet wave as before. This was bigger than his house. Karen wasn't just trying to bully him, she was manipulating the neighborhood infrastructure to get her way. And if she had an HOA-controlled electrician in her pocket, she could black out anyone who disagreed with her. But Karen had no idea who she was messing with. Luke didn't just understand power systems. He'd helped build them, and he had something even more dangerous than a generator. He had a plan. That night, Blue Jay Lane was quiet but not peaceful. There was a tension humming through the cul-de-sac, a static charge in the air like the neighborhood itself was holding its breath. Luke stood in his backyard under a dark sky, scanning the transformer pole 2 houses down. From the shadows, a small red LED blinked twice every few seconds. That wasn't a city's signal. That was his own motion-activated wildlife camera now repurposed to watch. Karen's little meeting spot by the electrical box. He hadn't caught audio yet, but the footage so far had shown Karen and that mystery electrician snooping around the infrastructure like raccoons with a clipboard. She wasn't done, and if she could flip his switch once, she'd do it again. Luke, we got company. Tina called from the kitchen window. He turned. Mr. Dorsey, their grizzled Vietnam vet neighbor with a limp and a love for bourbon, stood on the porch with a big bag of kettle corn in one hand and a 6-pack of root beer in the other. I brought snacks, Dorsey said, because this is the best show I've seen in 10 years. Luke chuckled, letting him in. You hear about the blackout? Dorsey snorted. Karen told me you were running a rogue power operation, called it a hazard to the community. I told her she was more of a hazard to my blood pressure. Luke poured 2 root beers while Tina brought out her binder of HOA violations and amendments. Dorsey whistled as he scanned the forged code. She really forged this. Yep, Tina said, and got utilities to flip our power based on it. Dorsey leaned back in his chair. Well, if she's bold enough to tamper with the grid, she's either stupid, arrogant, or both. Luke showed him the camera footage. Karen had returned to the transformer box twice. Once at dusk, once just after midnight. She's planning something, Luke said, and I think it's not just me this time. Dorsey's eyes narrowed. You thinking she's trying to control the whole block? If she's got access to the boxes? Luke said. She can pick and choose who stays comfortable and who doesn't, all under the guise of safety compliance. The thought chilled them. It wasn't just about power anymore. It was about leverage. Tina spoke up. I've got a friend at the county records office. If we can get a list of all recent HOA enforcement actions tied to infrastructure or utilities, we might find a pattern. Luke nodded. Good. Meanwhile, I'm upgrading our setup. He opened a drawer beneath the stairs, revealing a sleek, black inverter panel hooked to a custom-built battery array. This is enough to run our entire house silently. No hum, no fumes, and not detectable unless you're crawling through the flower beds. Dorsey blinked. You built a stealth grid, Luke grinned. I call it the Karen countermeasure. Outside, headlights swept across the living room wall. Karen's SUV idled near the street lamp for a few seconds before pulling into her driveway, but she didn't go inside. She sat there, lights off, watching. She knows we're not caving, Tina said softly. No, Luke replied, and that's what's got her rattled. The next day, Luke visited 2 neighbors he trusted, the Parkers, a young couple with a newborn, and Mr. Alvarez, a retired mechanic who'd been fined last year for repainting his shutters the wrong shade of brown. All 3 had complaints about power flickers, short blackouts that no one could explain, all occurring in the last few weeks. None of them had reported issues to the power company. She's testing her limits, Luke told them, and I think you're next. That night, Tina got a call from her contact at county records. 32 recent HOA citations had been filed under Karen's name in the past 90 days. Half of them involved electrical or structural access. The dates lined up with the flickers and outages, and 3 names matched homes with residents who'd challenged Karen in meetings. She's targeting dissenters. Tina said this is a coordinated effort. Luke's mind raced. If he could prove tampering at the city level and match it to her violation spree, Karen wouldn't just lose her little HOA kingdom, she could face serious legal charges. And now, he had neighbors backing him. The next step was dangerous, risky, but it had to be done. He needed to catch her red-handed. Tomorrow night, Luke said, we're going to let her think the power's out again. Tina raised an eyebrow. You're going to bait her. Luke looked at the blinking LED from the camera feed and smiled. She wanted control, he said. Let's see what she does. When she thinks she has it. By sunset the following day, Blue Jay Lane was buzzing with fake vulnerability. Luke had killed the generator and switched the house to silent mode. No porch lights, no hum. The garage sat in shadow. It was a carefully crafted illusion, a baited trap for a woman who couldn't help herself. Tina moved through the house, lighting a few candles in front-facing windows to sell the lie. The camera feed on Luke's tablet showed the motion sensor by the transformer pole active. Nothing yet, but it would happen soon. She's going to take the bait, Luke said, crouched beside the fuse access hatch in the garage. And when she does, I want every second recorded. She won't be able to spin it this time, Tina replied, watching the street from behind the blinds. Not with what we have now. The neighborhood was still, but Luke could feel the tension rising. Dorsey had posted up across the street with a lawn chair and a newspaper he wasn't really reading. Mr. Alvarez's front window cracked open just enough to watch. Even the Parkers had agreed to flicker their lights once before. Dark, pretending they too had suffered a second blackout. Everyone was in on it, except Karen. The bait was too good, too silent, too tempting. And right on cue, just after 11:42 p.m., a shadow detached from the hedges near the transformer box. Karen. She wore all black, blending into the night, her movements clumsy but determined. In her hand was a set of keys. She tried 3 before one clicked the padlock open. Then she slid the metal cover aside and peered inside. Luke tapped his phone, activating the thermal camera rig hidden behind the birdhouse. Karen's outline glowed red against the cool box. Her hands worked the panel like she'd done this before. She wasn't fumbling. She was familiar. Tantia, watching the camera feed, whispered, she's not guessing. She knows the layout. She's done this multiple times. That was it. The proof. But Luke wanted more. He hit the second camera, this one, a wide-angle night vision lens, catching Karen's entire silhouette with the box clearly marked. City property, do not tamper. Then, like clockwork, she reached for the switch and pulled it. Click. Nothing happened. No spark. No blackout. Nothing at all. Because the transformer was already disconnected by Luke earlier that day with proper city clearance. He'd left it empty and harmless. A hollow shell of wires. Karen leaned closer, confused. She reached in, tapped something. Still, nothing. Then she turned, glanced around, and muttered something under her breath, right as the infrared mic caught the words. They're bluffing. Time to shut them all down. Luke froze. Did she say them all? She's planning multiple hits, Tina said. Tonight? Luke's eyes narrowed. Time to ruin her night. He stepped outside and whistled. One long tone. A signal. Dorsey stood up. Alvarez turned on his porch light. The Parkers' front lights snapped on. One by one, each house Karen had flagged as a violator lit up in perfect succession. Like a choreographed rebellion, Karen spun toward Luke's house, was blinded by a sudden floodlight. Luke had flipped the breaker on the inverter system, instantly powering the entire home back to life. He stood at the top of the porch steps, arms crossed. Evening, Karen. She squinted through the glare, trying to regain composure. What are you talking about? I was inspecting for Save It, Tina called out, stepping beside her husband. We've got you on 4 different camera angles, plus thermal and audio. You accessed restricted infrastructure without authorization. That's not an inspection. That's a felony. Karen's mouth moved, but no words came out. She looked around at the neighbors watching, the cameras blinking red, the porch lights now blazing across the entire block. She was caught, not just in one act, but in the pattern, and this time she couldn't lie her way out of it. Luke stepped off the porch, holding a tablet. This footage is already backed up to 3 servers, he said, and it's being submitted to city utilities, law enforcement, and the HOA legal board first thing in the morning. Karen tried to speak, but Luke held up a finger. Oh, and don't bother with damage control, because tomorrow, your kingdom of fine print, fake violations, and shady power plays. It's going to fall apart faster than the fuse you just flipped. She turned and hurried back to her SUV without another word, disappearing into the night. Luke watched her go, heart steady, not victorious yet, but close. She just made her last illegal connection, he said quietly. Tina nodded. And tomorrow, we pulled the plug on everything she built. The following morning came with an eerie silence. No birds chirping, no lawnmowers, no distant hum of air conditioners. Just stillness and the knowledge that things on Blue Jay Lane were about to change. Luke woke early. He didn't need coffee. He was wired by adrenaline and anticipation. By 7:15 a.m., he was dressed, files in hand, tablet charged. And the security footage from the previous night, backed up and timestamped at 8:03 a.m. A white Ford Explorer with City Utilities Department painted on the side rolled up to the curb. Tina leaned over the front porch railing. That our guy? Luke nodded. That's Jenkins. Inspector Carl Jenkins stepped out of the SUV. A man who looked like he'd rather be doing anything other than refereeing neighborhood drama. His utility badge hung from a lanyard around his neck, and his toolbox swung from his hand. But his eyes were sharp. He'd been briefed, and he wasn't here for chit-chat. Double quotes, Mr. Mathers, Jenkins asked, extending a hand. Luke shook it firmly. Thanks for coming out. Jenkins raised an eyebrow as Luke handed over a USB drive. What's this? Everything you need, Luke said. Thermal footage, night vision, audio time, logs, plus the documents showing she forged the HOA citation codes to get my power cut. Jenkins let out a long sigh as he glanced through the files on his tablet. She broke into a city-owned transformer box. Luke nodded, with a key she wasn't supposed to have. Jenkins narrowed his eyes. Well, I can tell you right now, though, transformer boxers aren't HOA property. That's municipal infrastructure, and what she did, that's not just policy abuse. It's criminal tampering. Just then, Karen's garage door creaked open. She strutted out, arms crossed, sunglasses, unlike she was about to deliver a press conference. She stopped short when she saw Jenkins in the city SUV. The false confidence slipped for just a moment. Ah, you must be the inspector, she said, walking over as if nothing unusual had happened. Jenkins didn't even smile. You authorized the disconnection of Mr. Mather's power, correct? Karen straightened. Yes, as president of the HOA, I have full authority to enforce safety protocols, especially in cases of unapproved installations that endanger the community. Jenkins raised his brow. And where exactly in the municipal code does it say the HOA can override a utility provider without a certified inspection? Karen blinked. It's in the charter, she said. Page 7 section. But Jenkins cut her off. We reviewed your charter this morning. There's no such clause. In the citation code you used to submit the shutoff request, it doesn't exist. Karen's lips parted, but no words came. Behind her, several neighbors had emerged from their porches. Mr. Dorsey crossed his arms. Mrs. Alvarez stood with her phone raised, recording every second. Jenkins continued, You accessed a locked city utility enclosure. That's not an HOA concern. That's criminal access to critical infrastructure. That's a felony. Karen's jaw tightened. I didn't damage anything. But you intended to. And more importantly, you lied to get a resident's service shut off. Tina stepped forward, papers in hand. We've also discovered over 30 citations filed by her in the last 90 days. Many tied to homes of residents who've disagreed with her publicly. Karen turned red. You people are exaggerating. Jenkins didn't flinch. You'll be receiving a cease and desist notice by end of day, and I'll be submitting a formal report to the district attorney. I'd suggest you get a lawyer. Karen's facade cracked. She turned sharply and stormed back to her house without another word, the door slamming hard enough to rattle the porch chairs. The crowd on the street murmured Shucktan, delighted. Dorsey let out a whistle. That's the first time I've seen her speechless since 2017. Luke exhaled slowly, not out of relief but because the wheel had finally begun to turn in their favor. As Jenkins packed up his things, he turned to Luke and Tina. Appreciate you handling this the smart way, he said. Most folks either explode or let it go. You two built a case. It's airtight. Luke nodded. She thought she could shut off our lights and keep us in the dark. Jenkins gave a half smile. Well, she just found out who really runs the power. As the city SUV drove off, Karen's blinds twitched behind her window. For the first time in a long while, the street didn't feel under her thumb anymore, but Luke knew this wasn't over. Not yet. She would fight back, and if she did, he'd be ready. Thursday night arrived with a kind of tension that was almost cinematic. The monthly HOA meeting was scheduled at the community clubhouse. Normally a boring affair with coffee in styrofoam cups and arguments over mailbox paint colors. But this time, nearly every homeowner on Blue Jay Lane and 2 adjoining streets showed up. Word had spread fast. Karen Brewster was about to face the very people she'd tried to control, people she'd find bullied, and now, according to city records, unlawfully disconnected. Luke and Tina arrived early, hand in hand. Tina held a thick folder tucked under her arm. Its tab labeled Exhibit CF. Luke carried a laptop bag with the same careful calm as a man carrying a live wire, quiet, focused, prepared. The clubhouse was packed. Standing room only. Mr. Dorsey had claimed a prime seat in the front row, bag of popcorn in hand like he was watching a Netflix original. The air buzzed with whispered gossip and not-so-subtle side eyes directed at Karen's empty chair. Then, precisely at 6 p.m., the glass doors swung open, and in walked the queen herself. Karen wore her signature power suit, a pale beige blazer, high heels, lips painted a sharp red. But the usual smugness in her walk was gone. She moved quickly, without greeting anyone. She went straight to the front, sat in her chair as HOA president, and cleared her throat to begin. "I'd like to call this meeting to order," she said, tapping a pen against the table, but she never got further. Tina stood, raised a hand and said loudly, "I'd like to motion for the immediate suspension of Karen Brewster as acting president, pending review of criminal actions and misconduct." Karen's head jerked. "You don't have authority. The bylaws give any member the right to motion for suspension if misconduct is documented," Tina replied, "and we have documentation, lots of it." Luke stepped up and placed a small speaker on the table. Then he hit play. Karen's voice crackled out into the silent room. "Just kill the line to 104. He'll call it a glitch, and I'll take care of the paperwork." The room gasped. It was a conversation from 3 nights ago between Karen and her hired electrician, recorded by Luke's discreet Fettercam. No edits, no voiceovers, just raw truth. Karen stood so fast her chair screeched. "That's illegal? You're all harassing me." Luke didn't flinch. "You submitted a false safety complaint to the city. You tampered with municipal equipment. You illegally shut off my power, and you forged citations to punish homeowners who didn't agree with you. We've got proof, Karen, and the inspector does too." Murmurs turned to open outrage. Mrs. Alvarez stood and pointed at Karen. "You fined me $200 because my porch lights were too bright. You said it violated code 4.7.1. Double quotes. Tina held up her binder. "There is no code for .7.1. Double quotes. One by one, people began standing. The Parkers, the Lewises, even quiet old Mr. Jameson, who hadn't spoken at an HOA meeting in 5 years, stepped forward with a copy of a violation letter Karen had sent in date when she was out of town. "This is mutiny," Karen shouted. "You're all just angry because I enforced order. You'd let this place turn into a slum without me. You enforced chaos," Dorsey said from the front. "And you enjoyed it." Karen's voice cracked. "I am the HOA, not anymore," Luke said. He stepped forward, placed a sealed envelope on the table, and addressed the room. 37 homeowners have signed this petition over the required 2/3 majority to suspend Karen Brewster immediately and hold a new election. The petition is notarized and filed with the county clerk. Karen's eyes darted around the room. No one came to her defense. Her hands trembled. "You can't do this," she whispered. Tina walked up, inches from her, calm, cold, and confident. "You already did it to yourself." Karen tried to speak but stopped. Then, slowly, she turned and walked out of the clubhouse. Without another word, no one followed. Silence held for a few seconds. Then the room erupted, not in chaos, but in applause. The motion passed unanimously. Karen was officially removed pending legal review. Luke sat back down, finally letting himself breathe. Tina smiled. "It's done," she said. "Not quite," Luke replied. "The damage she did still needs fixing, and someone has to make sure no one ever tries that again." Karen Brewster's removal from the HOA presidency wasn't just a defeat, it was a blow that rocked the neighborhood to its core. But Karen wasn't the type to go quietly. If anything, losing her throne only lit a fire under her. Within days, flyers started appearing on doorsteps and mailboxes throughout Blue Jay Lane and the surrounding streets. The headlines screamed in bold, ugly letters. "Beware of rogue power hackers. Dangerous DIY energy experiments put our homes at risk." The flyer featured a grainy photo of Luke standing beside his battery bank, holding tools and wiring. Below the photo, the text warned that Luke's unauthorized solar setup was a potential fire hazard, and that residents should stay away from his property for their own safety. Luke and Tina exchanged knowing looks. Karen was pulling out every dirty trick in the book. "She's trying to turn the neighbors against us," Tina said, shaking her head as she sorted the flyers on their kitchen table. Luke wasn't worried, not really, because the flyers had an unintended effect. The neighbors came to their door, not angry, curious, concerned, and many, like Mr. Dorsey, brought popcorn. The local news caught wind of the controversy. Soon a reporter showed up, camera crew in tow, asking for interviews. Luke decided it was time to take control of the narrative. He filmed a MEASURED video, walking through his home's power system, explaining how the solar panels and battery bank worked, the safety protocols he followed, and the legal permits he'd secured months before. He posted the video on YouTube, shared it on neighborhood forums, and even sent a copy to the local news station. Within hours, views skyrocketed. Comments flooded to neighbors praising his transparency, friends thanking him for standing up to Karen's intimidation, and even some HOA members demanding a full investigation into the former president's conduct. The next day, a local news segment aired under the headline, "HOA President Sparks Outrage After Power Cut. Scandal, Residents Demand Accountability." In the clip, a spokesperson from the city's utility department confirmed that Karen's actions constituted unauthorized tampering with municipal infrastructure, and that an official investigation was underway. Karen, caught on camera during a brief confrontation with the reporter, struggled to defend herself. Her rehearsed lines about community safety fell flat under the weight of evidence. Meanwhile, the city launched a thorough audit of the HOA's finances and actions during Karen's tenure. What they uncovered shocked everyone. Large sums of HOA funds had disappeared into unaccounted expenses payments to unlicensed contractors, consulting fees to a company linked to Karen's relatives, and questionable utility-related projects that served no public purpose. Neighbors whispered about how Karen's power play had extended far beyond the electric grid. Luke stood at the center of it all, quietly pleased. He'd never wanted to be the neighborhood hero, just a man protecting his home. But sometimes, that was enough. Mr. Dorsey came by one afternoon with a battered trophy, fashioned out of a burnt-out light bulb mounted on a wooden base. "For you," he said, grinning. "Neighborhood hero." Luke accepted it with a laugh. As the investigation deepened, Karen's influence faded like a flickering bulb. She resigned from the HOA entirely, leaving behind a legacy of chaos and a neighborhood ready to rebuild. But Luke wasn't done. He and Tina began working with the city to install a community-wide solar backup system powered by neighbors who wanted to be free from power trips and from tyrants. One evening, Luke stood on his porch, flipping the switch that lit the entire block in soft white glow. He looked across the street, imagining Karen watching from behind closed blinds, and with a small smile, he whispered, "Lights on, Karen." The sun was setting over Blue Jay Lane, casting long shadows through the rows of houses that had seen so much turmoil in the past few weeks. But tonight was different. Tonight, the neighborhood was alive with light, warmth, and a quiet sense of victory. Luke stood on his front porch, a gentle breeze rustling the leaves. His eyes scanned the block, every home illuminated, every porch light glowing softly. The community solar backup system was fully operational now, a shared safety net designed to prevent any single person from wielding power, both electrical and political, over their neighbors ever again. Beside him, Tina leaned against the railing, her smile proud but tired. "It took a lot of work," she said, "but we did it." Luke nodded. "Yeah, no more Karen, no more rogue power cuts, just neighbors looking out for each other." Down the street, Mr. Dorsey sat on his lawn chair, nursing a root beer and waving a burnt-out light bulb trophy in the air. "Here's to the power people deserve," he shouted with a grin. Luke laughed, then turned his gaze to the house across the street, Karen's old place. The blinds were drawn tight, no lights. She had disappeared from their lives, swallowed by the fallout of her own recklessness. But there was one last surprise, waiting for the neighborhood. The city council had completed its audit of the HOA's actions under Karen's tenure, revealing extensive misappropriation of funds, fraudulent documents, and unauthorized tampering with city infrastructure. Charges were filed. Legal proceedings were set in motion. For the first time in years, the HOA held a transparent election, open to every resident, with no hidden agendas or shadowy deals. Tina was elected interim HOA president, a role she accepted not for power, but to ensure the community healed. Luke volunteered to oversee infrastructure projects, applying his electrical expertise to maintain and improve the neighborhood's power systems. One afternoon, as Luke was inspecting the newly installed community solar panels, the mail carrier handed him an envelope with no return address. Inside was a simple note. "Thanks for showing who really runs the power, KB." Luke smiled, folding the note carefully. Karen's partying message, an acknowledgement of defeat, wrapped in her own brand of bitterness. But Luke wasn't bitter. He was hopeful. He turned his eyes back to the horizon where the last rays of sunlight kissed the rooftops. The future was bright, and this time, the power truly belonged to the people. As the neighborhood lights flickered on one by one, Luke whispered softly to the evening air, "Lights on, Blue Jay Lane. Lights on,